weird to be at this point in the day without having played everything. I don't know why this thing. So feel the pulse in your bellies, breathe together. From the pieces.
And then full monotone.
Yeah.
Intonation, different finger pattern.
The thing that's not in any of the pieces in book 2. Shifting, exactly right. And the reason we're doing shifting in book 2 and then vibrato in book 3 is that if you teach arm vibrato first, which I highly recommend you do, it is a smaller version of the same movement, right? This is your basic shifting movement. And then that is your basic arm vibrato movement. It's the same muscles doing a more sophisticated version of what they've already learnt to do. And in my experience, teaching arm vibrato first has meant that I very, very rarely ever have to teach wrist vibrato. It just happens when they need it. Like if they're playing, you know, here and they use the whole, it's like shaking the whole violin around, then they kind of realise, okay, there's like a, you know, there are certain places where it's going to be more useful to do wrist vibrato, and the same with finger vibrato, which is very, very, very infrequently necessary. But so basically I teach arm vibrato and then they kind of get the rest through experience. So let's put bows down. So generally I tend to think of starting the exercises for vibrato by at least the point at which they're on Bach Minuet, if not before. So the second piece in book 3, if not earlier. Obviously it's one of those things that, like for me, I want them to learn vibrato during book 3 and to become really proficient at vibrato during book 3, shifting during book 3, so that by the time they get to the really hard pieces in book 4, all of those things can come together so that they can play a concerto in a way that has all of the elements that we want. Like it always makes me feel so sad if I hear kids play like Sites 2 with no vibrato, or any of the pieces in book 4 without any vibrato, and you just think, like, can you really play a concerto without vibrato? I mean, you know, we need it, right? So you need to be storing all of those skills up during book 3 so that in book 4 it can all come together. So what do you think are the main things that are going to cause problems if you haven't checked them for teaching vibrato? One thing, please, Mimi.
Clamping thumb.
Yeah, very good. If you've got a clampy thumb, or like basically if you're just like grabbing with your left hand, vibrato is going to be very difficult. Good. Something else?
If you're not really properly connected with your chin.
Yeah, exactly. If you're holding, and there's obviously interconnected, right?
Yeah.
If you're holding the violin weight here, you're likely to be grabbing or clamping, and therefore to soften that up. And this is another reason why doing the shifting during book 2 is really helpful, because most people, you will have worked both of those things out. If you're teaching the shifting first, you are in 90% of the cases going to have sorted that out, because you can't shift freely just in the same way as you can't vibrate freely if either of those things are happening. Something else that's going to cause a problem for vibrato?
Well, was going to go with the shoulder, which is the same as the same with the engagement with the neck.
Yeah. Can you think of something else
Um,
that wouldn't necessarily cause such a problem with shifting?
that would not cause a problem with shifting.
Well, not so much. You can get away with it during shifting, but then it's going to cause a problem for vibrato.
And we're not talking about clamping hands. We're not talking about a sort of. I mean, please enlighten me.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought
I mean,
thought
obviously,
clamping
if it's
clamping
in
hands,
this-
so-
Well, I mean, literally just the shape of the wrist. Like,
Oh,
you can have this, obviously that's a really exaggerated version,
Yeah.
but if you've got this, it doesn't necessarily mean you're clamping, but that's going to cause some problems for shifting, but you can kind of get out of the way a little bit. But then as soon as you start to try and do vibrato, if you're doing arm vibrato and you don't have that stable, then you end up with like a weird waggly, either unsuccessful wrist vibrato or a kind of like one of those ones where you see that the whole violin's moving like that. That's often to do with that. And I think for most of us, for vibrato to be easy, you want a very slight bend outwards, like not anything like that. But you know, if you think about that straight line that we talk about for the waterfall, it's the back of the wrist into the elbow being the straight line, not the front of the wrist being the straight line. Okay, so exercises that I set as kind of let's check that everything is working really well would be left hand pizzicato, so no bow, 4 on the E and on the G to make sure that the left elbow is also mobile, which is going to really help, and that they can do this without interrupting the waterfall. So let's just do, and then I'll show you what we do. So we're going to do 4 on 4, E then G, and then we're going to do 4 on 3, E then G, and then 2 and then 1. So you would be checking while they're doing this. Now change to 3. You're checking that the left elbow is mobile. You're checking that the thumb is doing the right thing. Can't remember how many we've done now. And then you go on to 2. And can anyone else think of something else that this is good for in the left hand? And 1.
Finger shape.
Yeah, exactly right. So especially on the lower fingers, you kind of have to like be practicing this to get that pizzicato happening, unless you're doing something strange there. And you know, so you're mobilizing all of the finger joints, and that's really helpful for later on. So that's one thing that I do. And then we go back to polishing just like you did when you were starting shifting. But so they might do like 50 polishes with third finger very lightly on the A string. And I talk about just go until you feel the shoulder and then come back. So they're going to sort of fourth position, I guess, if you're going to be like accurate about it, but it doesn't really matter. The point is it's not this. The point is just that it's... And you want the parents to put a finger on that. Can you feel that the bicep is working? Can you feel that your tricep is working? Have you got a stabilised wrist? I think stabilised is a really useful word, because what you don't want them to have a floppy wrist, you don't want them to have a wiggly wrist, but you don't want to tell them to tense the wrist, because obviously then all of that is going to go tense. So I think stable is really helpful. And I have used like a wrist splint, can be quite a fun thing to just put on them to feel that. Like, do you feel that you're like trying to move against it? And some of them, that's the thing that they need to work on for ages, is just being able to do that. And that may be because you've let them do a little bit of that while they're shifting, but it hasn't really been such a problem that you've picked it up. And so then, and you can even just in the air, this can be really helpful for them to do, because a lot of them just can't do that without also loosening the wrist.
So I found in doing that exercise that I had to really focus on what I was going to do with the tip of my thumb. So maybe that's just something to focus on, because I find that if I'm doing any kind of vibrato, the tip of my thumb does this, then I find it eventually doing that, I'll eventually work myself out and have to remember to bring it back in again.
Yeah. So it's just, I guess, about checking all of the different points. So what are the points of connection that you want, Ed? One point of connection that you want in the left hand.
Bit of your thumb.
Sorry.
So 1 point of connection with the.
Yeah.
So side of your thumb just by.
Yeah, exactly. The sort of, and if you're going to be really specific about it, how would you describe it to a parent?
It's not exactly the side.
It's not the side.
front,
It's not the side.
And it's not the side.
Because if they do the side,
Yeah.
then you're going to get that.
Yeah. So it's corner kind of. Yeah. What would you say? I mean, it's not the front. It's not the side. It's that.
Isn't it where your fingerprint is? Or am I just
No,
not in the
No.
right place?
this is your fingerprint, isn't it?
There.
Yeah, that's not what you want to have. Because then you have to bend the thumb, right?
Yeah.
I would say it's the inner lower corner of the thumb pad. Like if you look at your thumb, it's that bit there, isn't it? Like it's the bit, if you put it against your palm, it's the lower part of where it's going to contact your palm.
Yeah. I put that. I was just
So-
trying to feel what it
So
feels like.
there, yeah,
You'd say there.
yeah.
I actually use there.
Yeah.
So
Show me.
it's not. It's slightly turned, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah, that's the same. I would say that's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because obviously, also, if you're going to move it, it's
Yeah.
not going to be just only one tiny spot. Yeah, exactly. So you can kind of say, like, actually, if you try and touch it with your first finger on the same hand, it's pretty much where you're going to easily be able to touch. Like, you would have to try quite hard to touch it right on the side.
So is it
And
where
you
your
have to
joint is
come-
just above where it feels like your joint is?
Yeah, it's the bottom of the pad. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. You're right. You can't
That
do
makes
that.
sense?
Yeah.
And I think it's really useful to remind them that, you know, we have opposable thumbs and we can also use our thumbs like an extra finger. And on the left hand, you kind of want it like an extra finger, and on the right hand, you need an opposable thumb. So it's like ape and 6-finger human. 5-finger human, not 6-finger. Yeah? So it's like an extra finger. It's not doing that. You're not holding on. So if you have, okay, so another point of contact, Joe.
Fingertip. When you're making a note.
Good. It's a very easy one, isn't it? It's good. And the last point of contact.
Well, the base joint here should brush, but not. You really don't. You need to keep that free, otherwise that will.
Yeah.
Okay, won't it? But that will. I mean,
I
that.
think brush is a really good word.
brushes a bit.
Lots of people teach the vibrato gap, which gives you a very quick fix into being able to do this, and it's completely out of control, and it sounds like someone's having a panic attack, and it doesn't help you to actually refine your vibrato at all. And I think that if you did, you know, maybe someone's probably done it, their PhD into like how much contact there is in professional violinists at the base of the first finger on the left hand. I would be very surprised if many of them are not making some sort of contact, and it's very light. Brush is the best word, I think. But it's like you have to be able to feel it there. If you have this, then you've just messed up all sorts of positions in the hand and the arm, and there's all that tension.
And you're
And you can't you can't cradle your violin. Like, you know, if you're talking about a full-size violin, you're not going to take all of the weight with your head. It's too much. And if you've only got these, then you're either like you're putting your thumb under so far that you're taking the weight onto your thumb, which means that there's all sorts of weird shapes happening in your arm. Or if you're just this way, then you have to clamp down with your neck, because you literally can't hold it. There's no, you need 3 points of contact.
So that part of your thumb where it contacts the neck, you've then got a choice to make as to at what height that happens, right? So whether your thumb is here or as you were saying, more under the neck.
Yeah, and what do you think would change that? When do you think you would need your thumb more under?
Lower strings
Depends
or
on the length of your fingers.
Lower
your
strings.
fingers.
Lower strings, what position you're in. As you go higher, you're going to come under. Yeah?
Yeah. I get confused. That's why I was like doing this with my thumb a little bit, but then as you said, it's like, no, you're bending your thumb then, so
I think a soft bend is pretty much what
yeah.
you're going to end up with.
As long as it's flexible. I mean, you
It's like you don't want this.
You see all kinds of
Yeah.
thumbs.
Yeah.
as long as it's loose.
Yeah.
I think.
You see all kinds of professional thumbs as well.
Yeah, you do. I
All-
mean,
all over
yeah,
the
I
shop.
don't know how they
Really
make it
good.
work.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
some people with wacky double jointed thumbs, like Pelham. for
Yeah,
instance,
yeah.
I mean, you watch his thumb. It's absolutely. I find it.
Creepy.
I can't take my eyes off his thumb. The way
Yeah,
it
it's very
seems to
weird,
have a
isn't it?
life of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to crack on. So the exercises I would recommend, and we'll sit down and sort of write it out in a minute. But something, like this to make sure that most of the weight is being held with the head, that they're comfortable, that the wrist is not waggling in and out, and that you've got your finger flexibility. Loads of polishing, and like 100 polishes in a practice is really not very many. It takes like less than 1 second to do one of these. So don't set them 10, set them 100 or maybe 50 on each string, yeah? Something like they've got to do it a lot. And I think one of the things that's really helpful for the kids to hear is, like what I always say is like, oh, okay, so I've decided to run a marathon, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Do you think it's going to go well? And they're like, no. I'm like, why not? I can run to the end of the road. I know how to run. Why can't I run a marathon? They're like, well, because you have to train for a marathon. Okay, so that means that when you can understand that this is how vibrato works, that doesn't mean you've got vibrato. What it means is you've understood what you're trying for with the three C's, do you remember? Yeah? You've got comprehension, you understand how to do it. You've got cooperation, you can get your body to do it, and then you've got to consolidate, and that is just doing it a lot of times until your body can do it without getting tired. And when your muscles get tired, that's when you suddenly start to get really weird, like little kind of tics. And that is just literally your muscles are they're not used to doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, so you have to build up to it gradually.
I was going to say, this might be an out of order question in terms of what you've got planned for discussing it, but I'm finding doing vibrato with my second finger difficult because it's my longest finger. And it feels like I have to do something different to get it to do. Once I'm in it, it's fine, it's getting there. But actually, if I'm trying to do something where I go between the fingers and come back, it's like, what?
Yeah.
I
think the switching between fingers is quite difficult, but we are going to come back to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't worry about that.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, no, that's all good. So I teach vibrato just on A3 for ages until they've kind of got it. And then we start to do it on different strings, which tends to be very easy, and then different fingers, which tends not to be so easy. And the 1 is always the one that everybody finds the most difficult, and the 4. And I personally have watched a lot of people be really insistent on having a bent 4, and I think that isn't always helpful because it really depends how long your 4th finger is, what note you're trying to play. As long as you're not actually playing with a straight finger, it's okay with me. Because if you're trying to get it like this, actually I think that what happens is that the rest of the hand can get really disrupted, and then you end up with, like, if you've got a really long note on 4, you can do beautiful long vibrato on it, but if you're actually just going then it's just like it's not going to work, and you just end up with a load of tension in an attempt to to pretend that the 4 is the same shape as the other fingers, which it's not. Look at it, it's like so different in length. And it's almost half the length of your second finger, right?
Yeah, you've got a slightly short pinky as well, so
I mean, everyone does.
yeah.
They do. That is the shape of a hand.
No, but I mean, short as in
short
the top of
finger.
your
Yeah,
finger.
exactly.
The top of
Little
your
finger.
pinky should be in line with that line
There's no
there.
such thing
There's no
as should.
Okay.
Okay, enough. Right. So you want to set lots and lots of polishing. You want to set the left hand pizzicato. You want to set finger gym. Put your violins down, please. I do it with both hands because it's easier for them to manage, and it's also good for finger action on the bow when we get there, even though that's not for a little while. So finger gym, I am going, I don't mind what the other fingers are doing really, but with number 1 we're going to make a square. So both doing it together. Go towards each other, square and up. Square, and see if you can really get that square to almost like touch the rest of the finger if you can. you see what I mean? Not a square like this, a square like that, really tight in, yeah? So you're trying to expand the shape out, back, up, square, out, square, up, square, out, square. So you're really moving all of the joints in all of the ways that you can as much as possible, and all of the fingers do that, and then when you get to 3 and 4, it's always very amusing because the other fingers go mad. Ow, and if you've got a sore finger, that. And converse to most things, it's quite easy for the 4. It's very difficult for tricky 3, yeah. So we would do like 10 of these on each finger, and some of the kids have said to me, why don't we just do them all at once? But I just think it's really useful to isolate them, because you are going to play vibrato on one finger at a time often, and also to really have your attention on each finger and what it's doing. Okay? Got it?
Yeah.
So then, basically, once they can do those, and there are a few more. Okay, so another one that we do is the Nelly knocks against the wall. I don't know why I picked up my running. And so like these very early ones are kind of all interchangeable. They're not part of a like fixed set that move towards something. They're just all the different things that you need to kind of do at the same time. So Nelly the Elephant against the wall. Like imagine you've got your violin. Try and find the right length. Thank you. The right length. I'm playing a 17-inch viola today. And then you literally sing Nelly the Elephant all the way through, and you're going to tap with the knuckles, and you're going to have nice rounded fingers with the knuckles, and you're going to have rounded fingers, and your wrist is stable. Nelly the Elephant, Nelly the Elephant, Nelly the knuckles. Nelly the Elephant. And you're using your big muscles, so if you feel your bicep and your tricep, you should feel that they're working, because unless you're doing something wrong, that is the only way you can make this happen. Yeah, and make them sing it all the way through, because that is 24 times 6 repetitions and not 100 or 10 or whatever. It's a lot. Yeah, and then you will see if they've got a wiggly wrist, that will come up then. We also do Nelly the Elephant, and this is one of the ones where I want you to hold your violin here. Just going to involve touching the varnish. Put your thumb on and bring the front of your left hand away from the neck, so you only have one point of contact. Yeah, can you see the hole? Yeah, excellent. And then we're going to do Nelly the Elephant on the peg. And so the point of this is that you are mobilising the thumb joint. If you look behind, you can see my thumb joint is opening and closing, but my wrist is still stable. Yeah? And we sing Nelly the Elephant again. Nelly the Elephant, Nelly the Elephant. And they go all the way through it, and then they've done loads without realising that they've done it. And again, you want the knuckles to be touching the peg. So if you're doing it with the like finger joints, then you're going to be too low, and if you're doing it with the back of the hand, you're going to be too high. Yeah? Okay, good. So let's have a little writing break. So I think it probably is a good idea to do the polishing as the first one, even though I said they weren't in particular order. So you want to set 100 polishes with no bow on the A string between first and roughly third position.
On the A string.
On the A string. To start off with.
And this last where your hand stops on the shoulder of the violin.
What are you checking for?
When you're polishing,
Yeah. One thing?
grabby hand.
Yeah, good. So you need to make sure that you can't really hear anything, that you're not hearing on the string. Yeah, that it's like a harmonic finger. What else do you want to check for, Ed?
What when So I'm just polishing, doing
Yeah.
polishing. So you want to check. So you're listening. You're not hearing any.
Good,
Grabbing.
that there's no grabbing. Good.
Right. So you want to check. So we haven't got grabbing. We haven't got that. We want a good wrist position.
Good, that the whole of the left hand, like the whole of the left arm really from the elbow down is staying in one position. But if you did it in the air, it would look like this, and then you could just insert a violin and exactly the same thing happens. That there's no moving, the thumb is not being left behind or thrust forward, that the finger is not opening and closing, it's literally just your bicep and your tricep opening and closing your arm. One more thing to check for. Joe?
That your wrist isn't lagging.
Yeah, exactly. Stable wrist, that your violin's in a comfortable position being supported by your head. Good. You're doing Nelly the Elephant against the wall, all the way through the variation. Get them to sing the whole of the Twinkle variation.
Any particular reason specifically Nelly rather than Vibrato?
I think it just feels like a reasonable tempo. Fatter than a caterpillar, it will either be quite like urgent feeling,
Right.
or they'll just do it really slowly.
Right. So
which
it's
would
about,
basically-
So it's about tempo rather than
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
I think they're quite, triplets are quite good, aren't they? Because you get a sense of the forward and the backward. You've got.
Well, you don't, because you're not doing Nelly the Elephant, you're doing Nelly the Elephant.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So they're essentially
Oh, I see,
duples
so-
of the triplets, aren't they?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Sorry. So,
Yeah.
so it's duplicate.
So in fact, what you're practicing is one whole movement every note. So yeah. And you want to check that they're making contact lightly with the knuckles. Again, that there's no movement in the wrist, that the fingers are curved. And they can feel their bicep and tricep. Are they working? Is that what, can you feel the muscles actually doing the job underneath your skin?
Shoulder height. Well then.
Yeah.
Check, yeah. They don't work themselves down.
Yeah, exactly. And what will happen as they work their way through that is that it will become less even, and so that's what you're wanting them to work on throughout the week of practice. Is like by the time you get 3/4 of the way through it, the first time you do it, it will be like no, and so it's like, can you work on getting it more even and accurate? And then the left hand pizzicato. So I would normally, it depends obviously how keen your kids are to practice, how quickly they want to learn vibrato and how easy they find each exercise. But I tend to set 2 exercises to start off with. So it would be Nelly the Elephant against the wall and polishing, or left hand pizzicato and polishing, or left hand pizzicato and knocking on the wall. Doesn't really matter, like I said. Definitely knocking the E peg is the next step, because they've got to have it sort of sorted out.
Before the hits or?
Doesn't matter. So then week 2 you want to, or week 3, depends on how long they've done it for, you want to be doing this one plus something else. And I would just keep setting the ones that they haven't, really got yet. And so some of mine do 3 or 4 exercises, it's not a big deal. I wouldn't do more than 4, I don't think.
So how would it
Does-
still be to Nelly? Still to Nelly, isn't it?
This one, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got finger gym. Square, out, square, up, square, out, square, up. And like 10 on each finger, or 20 on each finger, or 50 on each finger. Depends how keen your kids are. And they can do that, in front of the telly or in the bath or walking to school, you know, it's quite a good one to do away from violin practice. I think we may have to do part 2. Can we do part 2 of this at 3:30? No, you're
I
teaching.
can't.
You can't either, okay. What have I done on my phone? Because approaching out of repertoire pieces and how to teach them. Well, next week we've got 2 hours on exam preparation. I feel like most people, whenever we do exam prep, they're kind of feeling quite positive about it. So should we do another half an hour next week instead? Okay, so TBC. Good.